These are Spanish vaqueros working fighting bulls using the garrocha. Garrocha is the predecessor of the cowboy's lariat. It's used on Spain's ranches to work cattle and test fighting bulls for bravery. To test these bulls takes bravery on the part of the horse and the rider. This bravery is the hallmark of the vaquero, something he brought with him to the New World. The roots of the California vaquero go back 15 centuries to Spain and the Moors and to Mexico. His heritage runs deep in his soul and is reflected in the way he trains his horse and the majestic way he sits his steed. The conquistadors transported these skills to the Americas. They were the expert horsemen of Iberia. When Cortez set out to conquer Mexico in 1519, he brought cattle, but it was Cortez's main honcho, Villalobos, who introduced cattle in large numbers for breeding in 1520. Cortez was rewarded for his success. In 1529, the Spanish crown awarded him a huge tract of land. It was almost 5,000 square kilometers. This was the beginning of the hacienda system and ranching in Mexico. Soon other conquistadors and noblemen were rewarded with land for their service to the crown. The hacienda became a self-sufficient institution, with the patron's house, stables, general store, chapel, and the vaquero and workers' quarters all within its walls. Raising cattle for hide and tallow was the main enterprise of the ranching haciendas. On the open range, the cattle not only multiplied like jackrabbits, but they also became wild. Controlling cattle was done the old way, as it had been done in Spain for centuries. They rode horseback and used the garrocha.
The development of the garrocha goes back to Middle Ages when the knights were working using lances. You see the two guys running at each other and carrying the lance like this. They're trying to unhorse their opponent. The whole purpose of the garrocha is to work with stock, and with this you knock the animal down. When you go to knock the animal down, you aim just at the base of the tailbone, just on the hip, and you have to gallop and you have to ride at speed, and from this developed the art of the garrocha.
Vaquero training and gear goes back centuries to the Moors of North Africa. In the year 711, the Moors crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. They brought their little barb horses with them. They rode to victory, conquering most of the Iberian Peninsula. Their barb horses were trained to anticipate their riders' every move and to obey without hesitation. The Moors rode with short stirrups, making it easier to wield their scimitars and thrust or dodge as needed. The Spaniards were no match for the highly maneuverable Berber cavalry. The Spanish knight was weighed down with heavy armor, and the only way he could control his horse was with a leverage bit. For the next 800 years, the Moors ruled. But the Spaniards learned from their conquerors. They bred their Iberian horse to the nimble barb, and this became the foundation of the Andalusian horse. And they embraced the Moors' ajineta riding style of lightness and responsiveness. The Spaniards perfected this new riding style, and during the Renaissance, classical dressage schools began to appear.
Through the 16th century, there was a huge renaissance of horsemanship going on in Europe, and the classical schools were getting developed.
Teaching horses precise movements for warfare was the reason for classical dressage.
Classical schools was reserved for royalty and upper military. Horses were a very prideful part of culture. And at that time, horsemanship was part of being a gentleman.
But another school of training was developing, doma vaquera. It came from the Moors. During their occupation of Spain, they would mount their highly responsive horses on feast days to fight a bull with a lance. This required the horse and rider to maneuver defensively in order to avoid being gored by the bull. In 1726, the rules changed. Matador was now required to fight the bull on foot, and the horseman, instead of fighting bulls, now tested bulls for the bull ring. This is still a Spanish vaquero job, and for this job he schools his horse to have lightning responses to his commands. The lance became the garrocha, a tool for fending off aggressive cattle in the field. Horse training for this purpose eventually became known as doma vaquera,
Doma, as in Doma Vaquera. Doma is to train a horse, and a vaquero is a stockman, and Doma Vaquera is to train a stock horse.
The way it evolved in California. The Spanish history says that the conquistadors and padres, the ones that were picked to come, the officers and the priests were all legenta horsemen, bent leg style of riding, and they were all master legenta horsemen.
Many of these expert horsemen became hacendados. They taught their vaqueros the disciplines of classical dressage and reinsmanship. In 1769, Father Serra led a land expedition and established the first mission in Alta California. Soon there would be a chain of 21 missions that would become the cornerstone of colonization. To protect the colonies, the Spanish built 4 presidios. Santa Barbara was the last to be built. Jose Francisco Ortega had participated in the founding of it and was made the first commandant. And in 1786, for his service to the crown, he was rewarded with a royal Spanish land grant. He named his 38-mile stretch of oceanfront property Rancho Refugio. It was on this land that 5 generations of Ortegas ranched and developed the skills of horsemanship and the vaquero arts of braiding and bit and spur making. Senor Ortega, like other officers who had received land grants, had been trained in the Spanish school of horsemanship, and handling these vast herds of bovines required a highly refined level of horsemanship. The patrones, who had been former military officers, were the finest resident instructors. They set a high standard, and from there, the vaqueros took it even further.
As the mission system developed, cattle became extremely numerous. So they started to teach the Indians to handle the cattle for them. The Indians were very astute students, became extremely good horsemen under the Spanish. This was the same period when land grants were starting to be issued to members of the military for reward for their service.
In fact, by 1831, most of the larger California ranchos were owned by former military officers.
This California Vaquero bridle horse originated from the war horse. In this California discipline, the horse was ridden in a hackamore, and the hackamore constitutes 3 things: the bosel, a hanger, and a rope for reins. Traditionally, the reins were made out of hair so that they could change the weight of the rope.
The next step was the 2-rein, designed to convert the horse from the hackamore to the bridle.
And that process was done with a much smaller hackamore that we would refer to as a 2-rein bosel. It gives you a way to signal the horse until he learns how to pick this bit up and support it with his tongue and his hard palate.
The hallmark of the vaquero was to use his reins to signal his intention.
You activate the bit and it lifts away from the tongue, and the horse answers you at that moment. He is answering on a signal before leverage takes place at the chin strap.
Taking the horse through the rigors of hackamore to the bridle is only part of the process. Skilled vaqueros can control a horse's every move through his own body positions. This is somewhat akin to classical dressage.
Kind of how dressage is tied into, for some working cowboys, is like if you're in the feedlot or you have gates that you can get off a horseback. Like you can pick them up and step them plumb over, come over like this, and then you can bring them back. And it's just, moving the front and hind quarters.
Bill Boswell learned from some of the old-time buckaroos in Nevada.
I noticed that these people that were buckarooing for a living, they took pride in who they were. They stood for something. You see a lot of silver. You see custom-made slick fork saddles that people would spend 2 or 3 months' wages just to have that saddle. Bits and spurs. They were proud of who they were. They took pride in their horsemanship and how they presented themselves, the way their horses worked. It was like they were as of one. They worked together in harmony.
Real horsemanship is where you can adjust to the horse.
When I ride, oh, when I ride, I can see I'm rising up to a Nevada blue sky, the snow-covered peaks and rolling sagebrush flats. When I stand at the top, I feel God's hand, no lips I'll praise His name for the peak once. Whoa.